One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. I am the founder of the Revenue Collective. We are the exclusive community for commercial executives at growth companies all over the world. We're in Denver, New York, Boston, London, Toronto, Amsterdam. Those are our official cities, but we've been signing up people, sales leaders, commercial leaders, marketing leaders from all over. Some of the folks include Kyle Lacey, the VP of Marketing at Lessonly. He's based in Indianapolis. Kyle Heron, who's running a sales team for Mind Gym. He's based in Houston. A group of people from Calgary in Western Canada. So if you're a sales leader out there, a commercial leader, or a marketing leader, VP level or above, we don't currently permit folks that are below the VP level. But if you're VP level or above, reach out to me over LinkedIn and we'll see if we can get you involved. It's really an incredible community that's been growing by leaps and bounds. But that's not the point. Today, the point is the Sales Hacker Podcast and the fact that we've got Max Altschuler, the founder of Sales Hacker, on the show. And I think you want to listen to Max, not just for sales advice, but for life advice. Max has a unique perspective on how to live your life, how to build your life, how to solve problems, and how to work backwards from your goals. And he thinks about things in a very engineering, systematic way that, frankly, I find very, very inspiring. And of course, we're here at Unleash, and today we are releasing, or at least this week, the new book that Max has written, I think co-authored with Manny Medina, the CEO of Outreach, all about sales engagement. I think it's called actually Sales Engagement. And so we want you to pick up that book at Amazon, but also we want you to listen to this amazing interview. Now, of course, today's show has sponsors, and we must thank our sponsors. They are our corporate overlords. They pay the bills. So bills must be paid. And as Sheree says from The Real Housewives of Atlanta, love don't pay my bills. But these particular sponsors do pay our bills. The first is Chorus.ai, the leading conversation intelligence platform for high-growth sales teams. Chorus records, transcribes, analyzes business conversations in real time to coach reps on how to become top performers. With Chorus.ai, more reps meet quota, new hires ramp faster, leaders become better coaches, and everyone in the organization can collaborate over the actual voice of the customer. So check out Chorus.ai/sales hacker to see what they're up to. And our second sponsor is our friendly neighborhood Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to create communications at large scale that still retain authenticity, vulnerability, and humanity. So that's really, really important. They also automate a lot of the crap work that eats up selling time, and they provide action-oriented tips using data on what communications are working best. So Outreach has the back of the folks that are working on sales and customer engagement. So those are our great sponsors. We thank you for listening. We've got Max on the show right now, and without further ado, let's listen to Max Altschuler, founder of Sales Hacker, VP of Marketing at Outreach, co-author of Sales Engagement, the book, and let's listen to how he approaches building a career, hacking sales, hacking his career, and managing his life. Thanks for listening. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome back to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest because we have the founder of Sales Hacker on the show, Max Altschuler. I don't have a full bio in front of me, but I'll tell you this about Max. He's currently VP of Marketing at Outreach. He started Sales Hacker years ago from nothing, built it up into a business, was then acquired by Outreach. It's still an independent entity. Earlier in his career, he worked at Udemy, and he's also written a few books. The first one, I believe, was Hacking Sales. I think the second one is called Hacking Careers, if I'm not mistaken. He'll correct me. And he's got a third book coming out that we're going to talk about in the show. And he's also just an incredible entrepreneur. And so we're excited to have him on the show. Max, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, the second book is Career Hacking.
Career Hacking. Okay. And then we're going to talk about it later, but what's the name of the third book?
Sales Engagement.
All right. We love sales engagement. It's important.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So baseball card time, Max. Your name is Max Altschuler. Where are you working these days?
So still CEO of Sales Hacker, so completely separate entity from Outreach, but VP of Marketing at Outreach also. We keep a hard wall up, as you can tell from being a Sales Hacker subscriber. Our marketing automation and CRMs are completely different. The teams are separate. So working on both of those right now, 2 full-time jobs.
You're like, whatchamacallit, Jack Dorsey.
It's a lot of fun. That's actually, I wouldn't have it any other way.
All right. So we know what Sales Hacker is and we know what Outreach is, but it's always good to hear it from the perspective of somebody that started that company or works there. So first, Sales Hacker, how would you describe Sales Hacker?
Yeah, it's the leading resource for all things B2B. So anybody who's looking to innovate in sales training, sales technology, sales recruiting, really all things around B2B sales. And we definitely started in the, tech vertical, and a lot of things were applicable to people selling into tech companies, but we want to continue to expand to new verticals. So you'll start seeing content on Sales Hacker shortly that is not just tech specific, but fire. I think it's finance, real estate, insurance. There's some other verticals, manufacturing, healthcare, that we want to make sure we're coming out with innovative new content for. We think that sales as a profession has really turned a corner. It's not, gone are the days of the aggressive snake oil salesman, and now it's the consultative, empathetic led sale. And you're starting to see people who, would come out of Ivy League schools and go into investment banking jobs right away, go into sales jobs at SaaS companies. And, software is eating the world and breaking into a lot of these different verticals. And we want to be able to support the growth of this profession beyond just, the tech companies that exist right now. So you'll start to see that content expand. But, we're here to support in a lot of different ways. We have conferences, webinars, podcasts, our blog, which is growing like crazy. And it's been an exciting ride since we started about almost 5 years ago.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. And now, because you have two roles, we're going to give you the opportunity. I mean, we know what Outreach does, but in your words, I guess, you're the VP of marketing. We obviously tell us what Outreach does, but tell us why you're so excited about the company as well.
Yeah. So really excited about the company because it's your system of engagement or your application of activity, the one place you can go to do all of your prospect and customer engagement activities. It's your one single pane of glass that you can do that from. And I think that, the buyer has more options than ever before. There are more channels than ever before, more mediums for there to learn, more ways for you to connect with them. And so you have to have a platform that allows you to take advantage of all those different modern channels. So this is modern sales. Phone and email are no longer enough. And you need to be, where something can integrate with a chat platform, where you can, send somebody a one-to-one personalized video if that's the way that they like to be sold to, or you can text or use, LinkedIn to get through to somebody, or direct mail, all in one platform, and really optimize that over time by A/B testing the content that you're putting out, the channel that you're doing it on, and cloning your best reps. If you see somebody on your team that's doing certain activities in a sequence and that's working, you can replicate that across the rest of your team. So you really can take your team to a new level of efficiency. And I think that's what a sales engagement platform gives you, and that's what Outreach gives you. And I know the fastest growing company in the space, and I know there's a lot of companies out there competing with us, but it's definitely we're seeing in the market and the response we're getting from our new customers that it's really working. We're really hitting on something.
Well, we're excited, and we think you've chosen some great communities to support through sponsorship as well. So we tip our hats to you.
Very excited. So Revenue Collective, hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. While we're talking about Outreach, how big is your marketing org? Just walk us through, we talk to a lot of sales leaders and they walk us through the SDR team, et cetera. But it's been really interesting for me to learn about how you've structured your marketing organization. So just give us all of how big is the team? What are the different functions that you are running as VP of marketing at Outreach?
Yeah, so we're somewhere between 30 and 40. And, Sales Hacker is its own team that's kind of under the marketing umbrella. So, that's just overall building a sales community there. So the Sales Hacker team is probably around 4 or 5 in the US, and then we have 4 in the Philippines, 2 in Pune, India. Then we have our demand gen team, which actually covers ABM, demand gen, field marketing, that's based out in San Francisco. So there's another, I'd say like 6 or 8 on that team. We have got a customer marketing team that's based in Seattle. We have 2 there. We have a product marketing team that covers communications, so AR and PR, product marketing. We've got a 2-person video team. So I'd say that whole team is about 8 as well right now. And then we have an events team that's another 2 people. So did I get all of that covered? Yeah, it ends up being like 30 or 40. But, I was in sales for a long time, and obviously, are deeply understanding of the salesperson and their day to day. So we work really closely with our sales organization. It's been a lot of fun to be on this side of the fence and be inside and working with our RVPs and our sales development leaders and our sales ops team and making sure that we are striving for another level of sales and marketing alignment. So that's our marketing team, but I really do feel like we are like one big revenue organization, and there's a lot of things that we're touching. I feel like I'm managing or deeply involved in a lot of the sales process and day to day. And then my third job outside of running, Sales Hacker and Outreach is the fact that I'm, somewhat of a brand or influential or, have a network in this space. I'm brought into deals, when I can be helpful.
Good. Well, you're often helpful. That's been my experience with you.
Yeah.
Let's learn a little bit about you, because your background's interesting. You are an entrepreneur. You started Sales Hacker. I know that you're an investor and advisor in a bunch of different companies, and then you're a VP of Marketing and Outreach. Where'd you grow up? How did did we end up here? I know that you worked at Udemy, but give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So I was not a very good student. So I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. But the one thing I really liked was architecture. And I always wanted to be an architect, like building stuff.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Long Island, Syosset.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So North Shore, Long Island, maybe like 10, 20 minutes outside of Queens. Spent 18 years there, went out to Arizona State for college, was an architecture major, was studying architecture when the housing market crashed in 07, 08. And called my dad. I was like, what do I do? Do I graduate with a degree I'm not going to be able to use? So I cashed that in and said, okay, I need to do something else. So I found out there was this thing called the Bachelor of Interdisciplinary Studies. And it also stood for barely in school, because it was like a really, really easy way to graduate. It's basically 2 minors equal a major. And so all I had to do was take the rest of my credits in business credits, and I can do a BIS in business and design. So while I was doing that, I started a bike share program, won a business competition, won a grant from the university, ended up getting exclusive rights to commercial bike sharing, a contract signed by, I think it was like the university president and the university architect. So we were really moving. But again, it was right after a recession, and nobody was going to give 23-year-olds a couple $1,000,000 to manufacture bikes and bike racks. So that business failed. I graduated around the same time. And my goal was to make American money while living abroad. So I put myself in a room in my apartment for 2 weeks and told a couple friends about it. 2 friends who hated their jobs ended up coming out, and we locked ourselves in this room with a bunch of Red Bull and Adderall and 5-Hour Energies and some beer and stuff, and hammered out a business
stuff.
Yeah. And we sold $5,000 worth of social media, a bunch of different things, whatever we slapped together in the 2 weeks we were there. So we were like, all right, let's see if this thing has legs. So over the next month, we ran it from the US.
But what were you selling? Where were you? Where was this room full of Adderall and Red Bull?
We were out in Arizona still by college.
And you were selling social media. What do you mean selling social media?
Yeah, so we were selling social media services. So remember when Facebook had business pages and they were all different? You could build out iframes and things like that. We were doing that, and we were outsourcing the work to the Philippines, the dev work, and we were servicing the pages ourselves, and we were charging monthly. So we were working with small businesses like restaurant owners, residential real estate agents, things like that. And so we took it to Costa Rica and Nicaragua for about 5 months and ran it from there. It was a lot of fun, and still continuing the whole Adderall Red Bull drinking thing. But
let's not advocate Adderall too much.
Yeah,
it's a dangerous thing.
It definitely is. Yeah, don't go out and get a bunch of Adderall. But it got me through that time in my life. Actually, I've been caffeine free and definitely haven't touched Adderall in 7 years. So
wow,
no caffeine for me. But yeah, that led me to Udemy. We were trying to teach ourselves how to code, and the Costa Rica thing was fun, but I was like, okay, time to get real, and went up to San Francisco, went through 7 hours of interviews at Udemy, ended up getting the BD job for one of it was the first sales hire and one of the first business development people at the company. And we were a small seed stage company, and I was there through their seed A and B rounds, and that's where I built out these processes that we called sales hacking, where we were farming out our sales development team to the Philippines using one of the earliest sales engagement softwares, ToutApp, which I don't think exists anymore under Marketo, then Adobe through the series of acquisitions. But we're using keyword SEO keyword tools to put together search strings that our virtual assistants could use to go out and find leads. Like, it was really interesting stuff. And I started a meetup, invite only meetup around it. Started getting a couple cool guys together to talk about all this stuff, just geek out on all things sales. Ryan Buckley was one of the early guys in there, and he was building Python scripts to scrape Crunchbase. We had Xander Ford in there, who at the time was the head of sales at BlueKai, which then sold to Oracle for a couple $100 million. We had Matt Ellsworth in there. He was at Storefront. It just raised a large Series A. So we met monthly with that Sales Hacker group. And then I went from Udemy to a company called Attorney Fee. Attorney Fee sold to LegalZoom. I didn't want to move to Austin and switch to marketing at the time. So I retired from that role and said to the group at our next meetup, which happened to be 2 days later, hey, who here would be interested if we, built a Sales Hacker conference? And in the room, it had grown because we were invite only, and we said only bring people who add value. In that room, we had Jason Lemkin, who had just sold Adobe EchoSign to Adobe. We had Doug Landis, who was the VP of Sales Productivity at Box at the time. We had Armando Mann, who was the VP of Sales at Relate IQ at the time, pre $390 million acquisition to Salesforce. We had Matt Cameron in the room, who had just taken on the VP of Sales at Scripted Job, and he was the VP of Worldwide Sales at Yammer previously. So we had some heavy hitters on there that could grace the stage and give us a pretty good game plan on how to build a modern sales process.
Did Lemkin steal SaaStr from this idea?
No. He was doing SaaStr Quora posts for a long time, but we'll actually get to that. So I started the conference, ran it myself in 4 weeks. We had 300 people there, made $60K in profit, and was like, oh shit, there's a business here. Like, I wonder what this will look like. That was September of 2013, ran the first conference. Then I took some time off to see if I, wanted to go start a tech company or be an early sales hire, see what was around. And, holiday season came and went, and didn't find anything that interesting. And February rolled around. I was like, let's see if I could do this in New York. So I ran the New York event. It was like 6 weeks, made $50K on that one. I was like, all right, let's see what's here. Started the blog, started webinars, made our first hire, and found ways to monetize some of the meetups that we were doing. So we started like a whole meetup series, and we're just throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what stuck, seeing what was profitable, seeing what people wanted and how they wanted to learn. And so a year after the first conference, Jason Lemkin pinged me and he's like, hey, want to do a conference? Can you help? And he's like, that's how he writes emails. They're like super short. So I was like, yeah, sure. Happy to help promote it. And he's like, no, I need you to do the work, and I need you to actually organize it. And I was like, okay, well, for the right, profit share. Yeah, exactly. I'm happy to do it. So we struck
I'll
a deal.
do anything for money, Jason, anything.
Exactly. Well, and it was super helpful. We made a lot of money off the SaaStr relationship that ended up helping fund a lot of things that we wouldn't have been able to do for Sales Hacker had we not had that. And, it came at the right time, and we were able to focus on, both Sales Hacker and SaaStr for the time that we had it. And so that's how that relationship blossomed. And now he's doing a fantastic job growing that business, and he raised the fund on top of it. And so we kept trucking with Sales Hacker, and started doing the webinars, started to realize that events were getting very saturated. It was tough for us to compete with, a bunch of these companies who had a lot of money to throw behind their conferences. So we kind of pivoted, and we took the business in a direction where it was more digital, and, experimented with online training, started ramping up our webinar program, launched the podcast. And the podcast is even a funny story. My team, we did a poll to our audience, and we asked a leading question because my team really wanted a podcast. So people, of course, voted for a podcast. So I said to my team, I was like, listen, the only way we're doing a sales podcast is if we have a different format than every other sales podcast out there, and if we have the right host. And so you were my first person that I went directly to, and I was like, Sam, if we're going to do a podcast, I need you to run it. And you're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So,
well, of course.
Yeah. I needed somebody who could talk the talk, but was also engaging,
How did you even know who I was?
At that time?
Yeah.
Well, at that time we had already been, friends through the New York, sales tech scene and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I already knew you. but your reputation precedes you, and now it's growing with the Revenue Collective and the podcast, and we're getting 6,000
downloads a week.
6,000 downloads a week. I mean, that's a
pretty
beautiful
damn good.
thing. Yeah,
it's an amazing story. I want to dive deeper, because it just, when you think about yourself and you self-reflect, and I know that you do it a lot, you've never had a traditional career, and you've always seemed to be able to, the way I describe you to other people sometimes is Max is a guy that can see the matrix. You understand how life and specifically business works, and you understand how to take advantage of the mechanics of business to generate opportunity, to generate profit. What do you attribute that skill to? Is it just something that came, you're doing a bike share at ASU. Is it something that comes naturally to you? Where does it come from, this entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, my dad likes to say that we have like part Romanian descent or whatever, so like we're part gypsy or something like that. I don't know. I believe it. There's some level of intuition or like wisdom that was passed down from him that I got. He's a financial advisor and he's a relationship guy, and some of the things that I'm good at are like, wow, I don't know where I picked this up. I don't know where I learned this, like a sixth sense almost. So I don't know how to teach it or how to tell people to do it. Some of those things just make sense.
How did you figure out so early on, you're 23 years old, and you immediately are thinking about low-cost production and how you outsource things to the Philippines? What was the origin of that idea?
Yeah, so it's one of the things that an idea that you throw at the wall and it works, and you're like, okay, why does this work? And then I'm like, all right, well, I understand the background now. It's like, how do I leverage this? How do I get more mileage out of this? And I think a lot of the things that I've been successful with in my life have just been a series of tests. I think that's why I like outreach so much. And that's why I like the product, is because your entire outreach is a series of tests. It is optimizing your playbooks. It is optimizing your channels. It's optimizing over time with data, with analytics, how you do things. So you can approach a problem from a million different ways. And when you get stuck, you have to think of a different way. So, when I do, one of the reasons why I like giving people career advice so much is because typically they're only thinking about it in one way, and they haven't tried to turn the problem on its head. So, I was with somebody the other night, and I was giving them some career advice, and because they're looking for a new role, they don't know what they want to do next, but they'd like this one to potentially be the last one that they need to do. And they're like, yeah, here's what I'm thinking in salary. Here's how I'm thinking about it. I was like, wait a second. Like, if you just told me that this is the last role that you want to have, then salary is not what you need to be thinking about. Equity is. And if you're thinking about this is the last role that you want to do because you want to retire after, then what is that number that you need to hit if it's successful, and in how many years? So if you're sitting there and you're saying, well, like 10 after taxes is my number, that means you need to maybe hit, 12 to 15 million on the upside. And if you're saying, oh, I got like 7 years left in me, then okay, you can join an early enough company, but here's the equity percent that you're going to need to take at that company. And oh, by the way, it's a huge risk, but at least you have the shot for retirement in the next 5 to 7 years at your number, if that's how you want to think about it. And so this person went from thinking about like getting rich and getting to their number in salary over the next 7 years to like, oh, well, this is how you're going to do it. Like people build wealth, and they do that through salaries, through high salaries. People get rich in chunks. They do that by owning pieces of things. And most people just don't think like that. There's no education system that ever told them to look at things in that light. And nobody ever said like, hey, if you're having a problem solving something, try and solve it backwards. Like there's no training on that. But there are things you learn working in startups when you work with really smart people who think about other problems in those ways. Like if you work with engineers or product people often, you'll start understanding how they think about problems, and you can actually use their frame of reference on other pieces of your life, like flipping the endpoint or flipping the starting point to the endpoint when you're coming up with a solution for a problem. That's something I learned from people running product at startups. And now I'm using in giving career advice.
It's great advice. Tell us about, where did the books come from, and how do those play into your strategy? And then we're going to talk about the third book, but I actually have some different questions as well about sort of modern marketing, because I'm sure you have some great insights. But, you're running all these businesses. When did you have time? I think the story of where you wrote the book is fascinating. Your structure for how to do it is all just a perfect example of how you approach problem solving. So walk us through the story of writing the first book and then the next couple of books.
Yeah. So the first book was supposed to be an ebook, and I was on my way to Bali. When I was running Sales Hacker, we were a remote company. So I spent, 4 or 5 years in a row doing Decembers over, Christmas and New Year's in Asia. And writing a book in Asia is a lot easier than writing a book in the US, especially during that time of year, because you have a lot less distractions during your waking hours. I'm getting up in Asia when everybody's going to sleep in the US. I got 8 hours uninterrupted, no emails coming in, nothing that I have to be reactive on. So it's a really good place to sit down and crank. What you need to do when you show up to sit down and write that book is have a really detailed outline. So over time, you keep a Google Doc, you keep throwing, okay, here are the 12 chapters that we're going to have. And then here are the sub chapters, and here are the subtopics under those. And then when you start, a bright idea strikes, you have another subtopic or, something you fill out under that one. What it ends up being is this long skeleton of everything that you want to write on once you have the chance to actually sit down and write. Where people go wrong when they write books is like they think they're going to have a chance to write, and you can't write an hour at a time. When you're on a roll, you got to stay on a roll. So if you have a life around you writing a book, you're just never going to get it done. So you have to go somewhere and carve out 6 days, have an outline that you come prepared with, and just get ready and go crank it out. Stay on a roll and write until you're not on a roll anymore. And so that's how I wrote the first book. I built the outline on the flight over, and that was 10 to 12 hours worth of work. And I sent out a type form to a bunch of different technology vendors that are included in the book and said hey, what would you want people to know about your product? And so I was able to use some of that information in the book. So maybe 10,000 words of the 30,000 word book, a third of the book, was information I got from the CEOs of these vendors. So now I had 20,000 words, a third of the book's done. And the outline came out to be, I don't know, the first part of the book, first finished version of the book was 27,000 words. And then ended up in editing at 31,000. So I wrote the book in 6 days in Bali, cranked it out, self-published it, sold about 30,000 copies. After 10 months, sold the rights to Wiley. And I'd say if you're writing a book and you want to sell a lot of copies, it's good to have a newsletter like Sales Hacker to launch to prior. Second book was similar. I actually wrote each chapter as a 1,300 word update in LinkedIn. So LinkedIn updates, and 1,300 words is the cap. Oh, it's actually 1,300 characters. Sorry, and that's the cap there. So I kept a Google Doc of every LinkedIn update that I wrote on career hacking for about 6 months, and what the engagement was on those. So I knew which was my best content, which to play to. And then when I went to Bali, I built the outline, wrote the book in 3 days, 30,000 words again, and cranked it out.
And this is Wiley owns this one too?
So that one was self-published. The third one that's coming out in March is the book on sales engagement. And that one was way more of a team effort. We had a lot of customers in there. I think you have a section in there. There's when you're writing a book, especially at the depth that we wanted to go on this subject, we wanted to highlight our customers and people that were doing this right. Hey, don't take our word for it. Here's how this company's doing it. Here's how these people are thinking about it. I think in the past, previous books, I don't know if the structure of the world was there in a way where you can get this information so easily from other people. Just everybody's on email all the time now. So when you write a book, I realize that I don't know everything, not even fucking close. Am I allowed to curse on the show? It is
Of course you're allowed to curse, dude. Come on, man.
I realize I don't know everything, right? So like, if I can go to an expert that's been doing that specialty longer than I have, I want to pick their brain and I want to put that out into the world. So that's how we think about these things is let's get other people to chime in and lend their expertise. So career hacking is the only one that like is all my expertise. The other books, like we definitely included snippets and things from other experts and wanted to highlight those.
So the book is Sales Engagement. So is it, and it's a co-author with Manny, is that right?
Yeah, me, Manny, and our VP of Sales, Mark Cosaglo, he was like one of the first sales reps for Outreach. Has been here since the very beginning and very science of sales driven kind of guy.
So tell us about the book. What are the main, if there's 3 to 5 key principles of the book that we should take away from it, what are they?
Yeah, so we're going to go really deep into omni-channel outreach and why it's so important. And so how to leverage one-to-one video, chat, LinkedIn, SMS, email, voice, direct mail, you name it, in your sales process, and kind of how to like triangulate all those things to make sure you're doing the right things for the right persona. We did a sales engagement survey with Sales Hacker, the Bridge Group, and Modern Sales Pros late last year, and we polled about 884 or something like that, sales leaders, and asked them about their buying preferences. And what ended up happening is we had all these breakdowns on how people like to buy. So like if you're selling to a sales operations person or an operations person in general, really like anybody in IT, their daily lives, they're sitting in front of 2 screens. So do you think calling them or leaving a voicemail or texting them is going to be a great way to interact with them? No, you want to get them on one of those screens. Where can you go to get them on one of those screens? Personalized video, email, LinkedIn. Those are going to have a higher chance of success with somebody like that versus a salesperson or a senior executive who lives out of their phone. So voice, any kind of phone call, voicemail, text message, you might have a lot higher rate of connecting with that person if you're connecting with them on their phone. So we're going to talk all about omni-channel outreach. We're going to talk a lot about A/B testing. We've got a lot of internal data that we're releasing in the book about kind of what we see and what our best practices are based on, what the data says. So we'll talk a lot about A/B testing. We'll talk a lot about account-based sales development, account-based marketing, and how you can really leverage that and go, whale hunting, so to speak, in the modern era of sales engagement. And we'll talk about kind of managing and coaching and getting the most out of your reps and replicating best practices across your team. And there's so much more in there. I mean, it's just chock full of actionable information in the sales engagement, the modern sales era, and how to get the most out of, engaging with customers and prospects to close new business and, land expansions and upsells and everything else.
So one of the companies that I consult for was saying that their connect rates on cold calls have declined from 11% to 7% over, some period of time, 6 months or something like that. It was basically, and then of course, all of us are getting predictable revenue style, email templates into our, and then I'm, the LinkedIn stuff is just insane because it just has no point. I stumbled. I love it when they say I stumbled across your profile and I thought we should connect. So my question is, are you all seeing a decline in response rates? Is it harder to connect with people in general? And that's why we have to go omni-channel? Is omni-channel, does it break through? And so you can get the same response rates that we used to get 5 to 10 years ago? What are you all seeing in terms of the effectiveness of initial sales engagement?
There's no cost to call somebody, like really. I mean, it's fractions of pennies if you actually do have some kind of software that does voice minutes, and there's no cost to email. So both those channels are free. Imagine how saturated they're going to be. And they're the only ones that people are really trying right now. LinkedIn was working for a while, and now that's getting saturated because people are picking up on it. So the channels that work tend to cycle. Direct mail worked for a long time in the advertising days, and then people went to phone and email because it was a lot easier and it was cheaper. You didn't have to pay for postage or anything like that. And it was easy to do. And there was no no gatekeeper or anything like that. You could just send it or call it, dial it, whatever. Data is so much more available now than ever before. And so it's just a lot easier to do those things. So a lot more people are going to do it. So that means it's saturated. So what do you need to do? You need to find other ways to access them. So direct mail is back. You need to get creative. And, if LinkedIn's not working, are there points in which, or people to which you think you can text? Is, one-to-one personalized video going to work for you? Is that something that's going to stick out differently than, the generic, templated email that everybody's sending? I think it's really the only way to get in now is to make sure you're leveraging a lot of these different channels. And if you're only selling to SMBs, then you need to build more of an inbound motion. But I think for a lot of people that are selling to mid-market and above, you got to go outbound. That's the only way to get them. I don't think cold calling is dead, but you need to have a sequence of events around your cold call. It needs to be a call and a voicemail, then an email that alludes to that, then a LinkedIn connection, and at the same time they get a package at their door delivered, and then at the same time all these other things are happening over a series of days or a series of events. And I think that's really important to connect it all together and to make it actually work.
Yeah, and Outreach can do that, of course. So that's a powerful component of the platform.
Yeah,
I have another question. This is a personal. I'm trying to figure out how I should be thinking about it. So we're on LinkedIn. Everybody's on LinkedIn. I'm seeing more and more of the videos where the person is sort of walking down the street or in their home office. In some ways, kind of like, what do you think about LinkedIn? That's sort of like the big question. The sub question is, a lot of people seem to be trying to become Gary Vee on LinkedIn. And I'm just not, I guess, as somebody that is savvy enough and sophisticated enough to have an informed perspective on whether this stuff works or not. What are your thoughts on, the LinkedIn feed at this point is full of, it feels like snake oil salesmen sometimes. It just feels like a lot of people pushing themselves in a weird way, and I'm not even quite sure what I'm supposed to be buying from them. What do you think?
There's a lot of crap out there for sure, but I think there are also people that are trying to add value without trying to sell anything. Just, here's some advice from me in my 20 years of sales. I actually like that stuff. And I think, when I wrote before I wrote any books, before I wrote a blog post for Sales Hacker, I had a blog called Max Talks Hacks. And I had like 4 blog posts queued up about some of the cool stuff I was doing at Udemy. This was really early in my career. I was a nobody, early sales guy at Udemy, but I didn't have a brand or anything like that. Like, nobody knew me from the hole wall, but I was doing some cool stuff. And I thought it was cool, but I didn't know if other people would think that it was useful. I didn't know if everybody haha, we know that. This is 101 stuff. Get out of here, little kid, And so I wrote them up, but I was really shy about getting them out there. And I remember a buddy of mine read it and he's like, this is awesome. You got to get this out there. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just a little shy about it. I don't know if I want to do it. It's like, if it helps one person, it's worth it, right? I'm like, yeah, I guess it's a good way of thinking about it. So I got it out there and I started helping people. And I think it's the same thing on LinkedIn right now. It's like, you could hold it inside or not do anything. But if you have some advice and you get one or, one person to look at it and think that it's helpful, then it's worth sharing. And I think if you consistently do that over time, as long as, you're coming from a place of wanting to help people, that's your right on a social network to keep sharing things that are valuable or value driven or, that can help people, and you'll build a network, and then those people will like things and that'll be amplified and you'll get other people into your funnel. And I think it's a great way to get people into your funnel, into your sales funnel, but you have to provide value. You have to do it authentically, and you have to genuinely like doing it, because you have to do it over a long period of time. It's not going to just come overnight. You have to keep doing it. And there's going to be a bunch of people that do it poorly on LinkedIn, and they're just in your feed and it sucks and you should unfollow them. But there is, some circus stuff in there. But for the most part, I think it's good. I think it's amplifying people's networks, and people are getting to know people better online, and instead of having to go to conferences to do it. And, we're definitely taking advantage of it at Outreach.
I appreciate your perspective. That's helpful. This episode is coming out, and I think it'll come out on March 12th, which is the last day of Unleash, which is the conference that you've spent a lot of time and energy, along with a bunch of other people, putting on this year. Just walk us through that process. What are you hoping comes from the conference? Because you mentioned earlier, right, that Sales Hacker got out of the conference business and moved to sort of a digital webinar content business. So tell us about Unleash and what it's been like and what you're proudest of and what you hope comes out of it.
Yeah, so our goal is to build, an industry conference, a sales engagement conference for the industry, not just a, user conference or customer conference. So there are a lot of people who are, I'd say prospects in the audience, but people who aren't technically outreach customers right now and are just genuinely interested in understanding modern sales and sales engagement. So we want to keep building up this event. We want to make sure that it feels very enterprise oriented or white glove, high touch. We want you to come and feel like our product feels, where this was just really well put together. This is, you can trust it. It's reliable. It's well done. Every, detail has been taken into consideration. It is a reflection of us. So we want to make sure that everybody comes and does feel like, wow, like these guys really care about what they do. And we're trying to grow it, but grow it steadily and not in a way where it's just like, let's have every frontline SDR there and bring 20 people from your company. It's like maybe later, maybe like when it's much bigger, but for now we want to keep it director level and above, sales development, sales operations, focus, sales leadership, and people who are really want to come to learn, want to come to meet others, not sell their own, sell their products or anything like that. So we are keeping it really high quality, as you could tell from the lineup. Some really amazing speakers there.
I agree with that.
Yeah, we're excited to have Wim Hof, the Iceman as well, and it should be a good event. We have March 12th will be that, and then also the day that we release the book on sales engagement, which you can find on Amazon as well.
Oh, so and it's today. If you're listening out there, it's today. So go to Amazon and the book is called Sales Engagement. That's it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're almost out of time, Max. Always a great conversation with you. I want to leave the audience. You have such a unique approach to life. So give us some advice. You've written a book on hacking sales, on hacking careers. So one of the pieces of advice earlier you mentioned is, try to solve a problem by working backwards, reverse engineer the problem, starting with the outcome that you want. But when you're advising companies or advising people, what are the common themes that you keep repeating over and over that sort of form the core of your personal philosophy?
Yeah, it really depends on the situation. I think like one of the things that has gotten me furthest in my career is always finding ways to help others and being as helpful as I could possibly be with my time, being positive, being somebody on, if you see a lot of my posts on LinkedIn or wherever else you read my stuff, I come from an angle of positivity, hopefulness, and realness, authenticity. That's, hey, the situation might not be the best right now, but like, here are the things we need to do to fix it. Let's have solutions for problems and not the other way around. So I'd say like approaching everything with that kind of like, all right, let's solve it mindset. Let's compartmentalize this thing. Let's break it down and then let's attack. Let's find a different way in. What's a way we could be scrappy about it? Just because you're at a big company doesn't mean that you have to go spend money on something. How can we do this without spending $1? How do we build relationships at scale when you're at a company that's doubling year over year and you are stretched thin? It's like, all right, well, we need to be very creative about, how we approach things. We need to be very creative about, partnering with people like you and the New York Revenue Collective and the other Revenue Collective locations and saying, all right, here's how we can get in front of a lot of people and provide value for them. And sometimes it's, you have to spend a little money, and sometimes it's, you have to get on a plane. Sometimes it's, you have to spend a little extra time on LinkedIn sharing nuggets of vulnerability or value or wisdom or whatever it is to, interact with your audience. And I think like in a lot of ways, there's no easy way, but you can definitely think outside the box.
That's good advice. And I think you're absolutely right about helping other people. I think that is coupled with optimism. That's how you just have to maintain that every day.
Oh yeah. Business karma.
That's it, man. Folks are out there listening. You're pretty active on LinkedIn. So I guess if they want to reach you and interact with you, they can do that on LinkedIn. They can comment on any of your posts, connect with you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the place to find me. You got the book coming out on Amazon under Sales Engagement. And shoot me an email. I'm glad you're listening to the Sales Hacker podcast. Sam, you're doing a fantastic job. I think it shows in the amount of listeners we've got in such a short amount of time. And we're excited to continue making the show better and better and bring on amazing guests. And, shoot me and Sam a note if you have any suggestions for guests. We're always looking to make sure that we got the best and the brightest on, right?
Yeah, and we want more diversity. I think this is a run. It's March 12th. I think like the last 4 or 5 people have all been white men. So if you're out there and you've got some candidates that reflect different walks of life, different ethnicities, different genders, please get in touch with us because we want to showcase diversity.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Max, thanks for being on the show. I'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. This is Sam's Corner, and we were honored to have on today's show Max Altschuler, who founded Sales Hacker, who was an early sales employee at Udemy, who now runs marketing at Outreach in addition to continuing to run Sales Hacker, and who has been a guest and a prominent thought leader, particularly for people new to their careers here at Unleash in San Diego, but also just generally. And Max shared a lot of really important insight, not about how to run a B2B sales team or SDR comp plans or things like that, but just how to think about your life and how to think about problem solving. And Max approaches problems by thinking about the end result and then working backwards, reverse engineering the process based on what he wants the end result to be. I think the other thing that he does is he fundamentally questions assumptions about how things must work. And it's been impressive to watch him build these companies and create his own path, blaze his own path. He mentioned he went to Bali to write the first book, and he went to Bali because it's beautiful and he's Max, but also because it's on a totally different time zone. And so when he woke up, everybody else was going to sleep. And so he would wake up without interruption and write for, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours straight. He also outlined the book beforehand and cobbled together sort of user-generated content from all of these interviews that he'd done. And so in many ways, the book essentially wrote itself, and he has a whole framework for it. He mentioned that the book is 30,000 words. All of these are insights into how he deconstructs some seemingly not impossible, but seemingly difficult, complicated, and amorphous problems. And then the other thing I would say, just if you know Max, is he takes the approach of questioning conventional decisions, and he comes up with his own perspectives and his own insights. And so he's created a life for himself based on an ability to understand how problems can be solved creatively and how value can be created at the enterprise and individual level, and then not necessarily adhering to what other people say or articulate the path should be. I think that's particularly important in these days because careers are ever changing. We're turning over jobs more often than we ever have. And so it's really, really important that you develop your own personal framework for how to manage your life and how to proceed through your life. And I have a lot of respect for Max and for the work that he's done building both Sales Hacker and this podcast, but of course, just how he's managed and charted the course of his life. So I thought it was a great interview. Super excited to know him, and thanks for listening. Before we go, of course, we want to let you know that you can share this content anywhere that you think is appropriate. We would love it if you told your friends. We would love it if you shared with other folks. We would love it if you bought the new Sales Engagement book, which I believe is out as of this recording. That is published in conjunction with Outreach and with Manny Medina, I think is a big contributor, the CEO of Outreach. And then finally, of course, we want to thank our sponsors for the episode. Big shout out to Chorus, the leading conversation intelligence platform, and Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you made it to Unleash in San Diego. And if you didn't, we will see you next year. But thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.